So you're thinking about moving in with your significant other before getting married.
Huge step.
It is a big decision, right?
Oh, yeah.
Lots of debate about it.
Tons.
You know,
Tons.
is it going to strengthen the relationship or is it a recipe for disaster?
Right?
We are going to unpack all that today for you.
Yeah, we've looked at the research. We've got stories and expert opinions.
So you can make the choice that's right for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting how much this has changed even in recent years.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago that living together before marriage was like taboo.
Right.
And now it's almost like it's expected.
Yeah, it feels like a rite of passage for so many couples now.
Right.
But before you sign that lease,
Yeah.
let's take a look at both sides. You know,
Yeah.
why are some people like, this is the best thing ever? And
Right,
other people
yeah.
are like, no, this is a slippery slope.
Exactly. Well, one of the biggest arguments in favor of living together first is it's like a compatibility test drive.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. You get to see each other's true colors, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And you'll learn if your lifestyles actually mesh,
Right.
how you handle conflicts,
Yeah.
and if you can really stand each other's morning breath.
Right. It's like a sneak peek behind the curtain of like happily ever after.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of happily ever after, some research has shown that couples who live together before marriage
Right.
actually have lower divorce rates.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a study that was published in the Journal of Marriage and Family,
Okay.
and it found that couples who lived together before getting married,
Mhm.
they were more likely to have realistic expectations about married life.
Makes sense.
So they weren't as blindsided by like the everyday challenges.
Yeah, you're not going in with those rose-colored glasses on thinking everything's going to be perfect.
Exactly. So it's not just about avoiding deal breakers. It's
Yeah.
about going into the marriage with a clear picture of what you're actually signing up for.
Yeah.
But I've also heard the opposite,
Okay.
that living together can lead to resentment and make it too easy to just walk away when things get tough.
Oh, yeah. That's the complacency trap.
Okay.
So without that legal commitment of marriage,
Yeah.
some couples might slip into a routine and they kind of put less effort into nurturing the relationship.
Okay.
They start taking each other for granted, or they avoid having those really important conversations about long-term goals, finances,
right.
because it's easier to just ghost along.
So instead of building a solid foundation,
Yeah,
they're kind of building a comfortable rut.
exactly. And that can lead to something called sliding into marriage,
Sliding into marriage.
which is basically tying the knot just because it feels like the next logical step.
Okay.
Not necessarily because it's like a conscious, heartfelt decision.
Interesting.
You know, it's that we've been living together so long, we might as well make it official.
I see what you're saying.
Right.
And that's a recipe for trouble down the line.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can see that.
And I imagine it makes it easier to just call it quits when things get rocky.
Yeah.
Because you haven't made that like formal commitment. You haven't gone through that public ritual of till death do us part,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely. There was some research from the National Marriage Project at the University of Virginia,
Okay.
and they found that couples who move in together before getting engaged or making a clear commitment to marry
Uh-huh.
are actually more likely to break up even if they do eventually get married.
Interesting.
So it's like the lack of a clear intention
Right.
at the outset kind of sets a different tone.
So it's not just about living together.
Right.
It's about why are you living together?
Exactly.
Are you moving in together because you're both excited to take this step towards marriage?
Uh-huh.
Or are you doing it for convenience or finances or just to avoid being alone?
Those are the questions
Yeah.
you got to ask yourself.
Yeah, those are important questions to ask yourself.
For sure.
And it brings up another point,
Yeah.
which is how does living together actually impact your views on marriage itself?
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. Because for some couples, it can actually diminish the significance of marriage.
Right. Because you're already living like you're married.
Yeah.
So what's the big deal about making it official?
Exactly.
Right.
Like the big day might feel less special.
Yeah.
And the commitment might feel less committal.
Exactly.
But for other couples, sharing that space
Uh-huh.
and navigating those daily challenges can actually deepen their desire for marriage.
Right.
It's like seeing each other at your best and your worst
Yeah.
and still choosing to build a life together
Exactly.
makes that decision even more meaningful.
It's like you've been through it.
Yeah.
You know what you're getting into.
So it's all about how you interpret the experience.
Yeah.
You know, how it shapes your perspective on commitment.
Right.
We've talked a lot about research and theories, but you know, sometimes hearing from real people
Oh, yeah.
who have walked this path can really make it hit home.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the stories that you've come across?
Oh, let me tell you. There's this one story that really stuck with me.
Okay.
It was from this woman who said that living together before marriage actually made her feel more secure about getting married.
Interesting.
She said she and her partner
Yeah.
used that time to really work on how they communicate,
Uh-huh.
learn about each other's little quirks,
Right.
and figure out how to deal with disagreements without things blowing up.
Yeah.
So by the time they actually walked down the aisle,
Right.
they felt like they had a really strong foundation.
They had like all the tools
They had the tools.
in their toolbox to deal with whatever came up.
Exactly.
It sounds like they used that time living together as like a training ground for marriage.
Yeah, like a boot camp.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
But then there was this other story,
Okay.
almost the opposite.
Oh.
This guy felt like living together just created this pressure to get married.
Oh.
Even though he wasn't really sure it was the right decision,
Yeah.
he ended up feeling trapped and resented his partner for what he thought were her expectations.
It sounds like there wasn't a lot of communication in that one.
Yeah, that's a great example of how important it is to be on the same page about your intentions and to have those honest conversations.
Oh, yeah?
It's not about conforming to societal pressure.
Right.
It's about making a choice that feels right for both people.
Exactly. And speaking of societal pressures,
Yeah.
it's interesting how the whole cultural context around cohabitation has changed so much.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it really wasn't that long ago that it was like frowned upon,
Yeah.
even scandalous.
Right.
Now it's almost like a prerequisite for marriage in some circles.
Yeah, it's like if you're not living together first,
Yeah.
people are like, aren't you worried you're rushing into things?
Exactly.
Or don't you want to make sure you're actually compatible?
Right. It's like there's this unspoken timeline for relationships now.
Yeah.
And cohabitation has become this like mandatory checkbox.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And that can create a lot of pressure, especially for younger couples who maybe aren't ready for that level of commitment.
Right.
Or who just have different values and beliefs.
Right, like they're being pushed into it before they've even really thought about what they want,
Exactly.
both individually and as a couple.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate those external pressures?
That's a good question.
How do you make a choice that feels right for you?
Well, it all goes back to communication.
Okay.
But this time, it's not just with your partner,
Uh-huh.
it's with yourself.
What do you want?
Exactly.
Oh.
What do you believe about cohabitation? What are your comfort levels and your boundaries?
Right.
And once you've done that internal work,
Yeah.
then you can have those open and honest conversations with your partner.
It's about aligning your internal compass with your relationship compass
I like that.
and making sure they're pointing in the same direction
Yeah.
and not being afraid to challenge those societal norms
Yeah,
if they don't feel right to you.
absolutely. Because at the end of the day, this is your relationship.
Right.
You get to define what success looks like,
Yeah.
what happiness feels like, and what path you want to take.
I love that. It's about recognizing that there's no one right way to do relationships
Exactly.
and embracing the beauty of that individuality.
Right on.
This whole conversation has got me thinking about another aspect of cohabitation that we haven't really touched on.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
The legal and financial side of things.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Moving in together isn't just about love and emotions.
Right.
It's also about practical matters.
Mhm.
And those practical matters can have a big impact on your relationship.
Both short-term and long-term.
Absolutely.
It's like the business side of love.
Yeah.
What are some of the legal and financial things that couples should think about before moving in together?
Well, first off, it's really important to understand the legal status of cohabiting couples.
Okay.
Because in a lot of places, they don't have the same rights and protections as married couples do.
Right, so things like inheritance, property division, even making decisions in medical emergencies
Exactly.
could get really complicated.
Yeah, if you haven't taken the legal steps to protect yourself,
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to have these conversations early on.
Okay.
And think about putting legal agreements in place, like cohabitation agreements or wills.
It's like you're creating a safety net just in case things don't go as planned.
Exactly. And it's not just about protecting yourselves if you break up.
Right.
It's also about making sure your wishes are respected
Uh-huh.
and that your partner's taken care of if something happens.
Yeah.
So being proactive
Mhm.
and taking those steps to protect yourself and the relationship
So important.
is.
And on the financial side, what are some of the things that couples should talk about?
Well, you got to have those money talks
The money talks
early and often.
early and often. I like that.
Yeah, you need to figure out how you're going to split the expenses, how you'll handle joint accounts, and how you'll manage your finances overall as a couple.
And just being transparent about your financial habits, your goals,
Yes.
any debts you might have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, let's face it, money can be a huge source of stress.
Oh, yeah.
And conflict in any relationship and living together
Yeah.
can make those issues even worse if
Yeah.
you're not on the same page.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about splitting the rent 50-50.
Right.
It's about having a shared understanding of your values and priorities when it comes to money.
Yeah. Are you both savers?
Yeah.
Are you spenders?
Do you have the same goals for the future?
Are you comfortable with how the other person handles money?
Right. These are all things you probably don't think about when you're in that honeymoon phase.
Exactly.
Yeah, and being open to compromise and finding what works for both of you.
So it's like finding that financial harmony,
Exactly.
just like you would for emotional harmony.
Exactly.
In a relationship.
And it's ongoing, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like a one-time conversation.
Right.
As your lives change, your finances change.
You have to adapt.
You got to adapt and
Yeah.
adjust.
So it's all about flexibility.
Yeah.
Open communication,
Hmm.
willingness to work together as a team.
It is. And that's really true for all aspects of living together,
Right.
not just the money stuff.
Not just the finances.
Yeah.
It sounds like whether you're thinking about moving in together or you're already living together, there's a lot to think about
There is.
beyond, whose turn it is to do the dishes.
Oh, yeah. It's about going into it with your eyes wide open,
Yeah.
understanding both what you might gain and what the challenges might be,
Right.
and being willing to put in the effort
Yeah.
to make it a good experience for both people.
And remembering there's no one right answer.
No,
What works for one couple might not work for another.
exactly. And that's okay.
And that's okay.
It's about finding your own rhythm,
Right.
your own definition of success,
Yeah.
and creating a living situation that feels right for both of you.
That's what makes this so interesting to me.
Yeah.
It's not just about sharing a space. It's about all these bigger questions.
Yeah.
Commitment expectations.
For sure.
How do we even define relationships in today's world?
It's about challenging those old ways of thinking
Yeah.
and creating relationships that actually work for us as individuals.
Because at the end of the day, whether you choose to live together before marriage or after marriage,
Or not at all.
or not at all,
Yeah.
the important thing is that you're making a conscious choice.
A choice that feels good in your heart and your head and your gut.
And that you're doing it with someone who's just as committed as you are to making that choice work.
And who's willing to keep growing with you as you move through life.
So if you're thinking about this,
Yeah.
remember there's no right or wrong answer.
It's about what feels right for you.
And having the courage to create a relationship that reflects your values.
And what you want out of life.
We've tried to give you all the info you need
Mm-hmm.
to make a good decision about cohabitation.
Or whatever that decision might be.
Yeah, whatever that decision is. Hopefully this has sparked some good conversations with your partner.
And maybe even with yourself.
And maybe even with yourself.
It's important to keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah.
Keep looking for different perspectives.
Right.
And just keep building a relationship that feels real and honest
Yeah.
and fulfilling.
Because that's what it's all about.
That connection,
Yeah, finding that connection, that partnership.
that sense of belonging.
Creating a love story that's uniquely yours.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.